When I was just a wee whippersnapper, I found myself in possession of a PlayStation Store gift card. I guess I had used most of it and only had $5 or so left on it to spend. I saw a game on the store called Silent Hill. Even as a stupid kid, I was aware of the game's legendary status, but all I really knew about it was that it was scary, had fog, and some guy with a Dorito for a head. Looking like the best option, I pulled the trigger on purchasing it. Alas, when I tried to play it, the monsters and atmosphere were too scary. Even scarier were the shitty tank controls. I wouldn't make it very far before giving up. Flash forward years later though, and I was starting to get into survival horror proper. After playing games like Resident Evil, Dead Space, and The Evil Within, I remembered that another survival horror heavyweight was just sitting on my PS3 waiting to be played. I now had an appreciation for tank controls and saw the purpose they served in games like Resident Evil, so I figured the controls would no longer be a hurdle for me. It also helped that I was no longer 10. Thus, I booted up the dinosaur of a game, not quite sure what to expect. Little did I know that it'd be the first entry in a series that is now one of my favorites. Corny intros aside, I do love this game. I don't think that can be hidden, so think of this as my 2 cents rather than a review. That being said, I will recognize some of the flaws in this game. I'm sure practically everyone knows the history of Silent Hill by now, but if you don't, I'll give a rundown. In the 90s, Capcom's Resident Evil series was really popular, and seeing this, Konami wanted to capitalize on the popularity of survival horror, so they created a team of employees who they considered to be fuck-ups to make it. This was the creation of the legendary Team Silent behind the first 4 Silent Hill games. That's the incredibly abridged version, so with that in mind, here's how the game begins. So, Silent Hill starts out with a CGI cutscene that pretty much sets the stage for the game. Harry Mason, a writer and bell bomb enthusiast, is driving to the resort town of Silent Hill with his daughter Cheryl for a vacation. He's also being tailed by a cop. All of a sudden, a figure appears right in front of Harry's Jeep. He swerves and spins out of control, crashing his car. Apparently his whole sequence and the rest of the CGI cutscenes in the game were made by just one dude who slept under his desk for 2 years to pull it off. And for a PS1 game, they look pretty damn good. Knowing the Japanese work economy, he probably got a good noodle star for that. Once you actually start the game, Harry emerges from his wrecked car, but Cheryl is nowhere to be found. He makes his way through the fog and faintly makes out her figure. He gives chase and she leads him into an alley. Once in there, it gets suddenly dark, and here we can see how the camera uses some dynamic shots to give a cinematic feel, which is pretty cool. Harry reaches a dead end and is swarmed by monsters. You can run, but they'll get you eventually. You die and Harry wakes up in a diner. Just the first of many mindfucks in the game. Here Harry meets Sybil, a cop from the town over. She has no answers as to what's going on in the town for Harry, but she decides she needs to get backup. Before splitting up, she asks Harry if he has a gun, to which Harry gives a very unsure answer.
No.
Sybil then gives Harry a burner and tells him not to shoot everything he sees. Once Sybil is gone, you can pick up some items in the diner like health drinks and a knife you'll never use. Right before you leave, a handheld radio starts going haywire before Harry utters this iconic line.
Radio. What's going on with that radio?
As Harry investigates, a fucking pterodactyl bursts through the window and he has to dispatch it with his new toy. So yeah, the radio pretty much acts as a monster monitor. When you're near a monster, the radio starts blaring static. It never really sounded like static to me though. I always thought it sounded like a T-Rex roar that was really compressed or something. Anyway, from here, Harry decides to check out that alley again, but you can explore the town to your heart's content. There aren't many buildings you can go into except for a couple, but if you're anything like me, looking at these fake businesses in games is pretty interesting, as long as there aren't monsters trying to make a meal out of you. I think my personal favorite is Poston Market. I would encourage exploration early on, because there's a decent amount of items just laying around that are good to stock up on around the town. It's a good idea to stray off the beaten path in general, because there's items everywhere. You never know when you'll find 3 health drinks in a vending machine. So when you check out the alley, you get your first clue as to Cheryl's whereabouts and a metal pipe that immediately replaces the knife. Also Cheryl's sketchbook, which has a really good portrait of Harry.
Damn, who the fuck cut your hair, bro? They've got to mow the whole goddamn lawn.
So now we know to go to the school, and getting there requires us to dick around town some more, but when you finally get there, it's our first taste of the general level-based structure of the game. Games don't really scare me, but when I reach a school, I'm always like, here we go. because it's not easy to just run away like you can outside with all those monsters. The main enemies here are these kids with knives that'll grab on you, and yeah, they're pretty creepy, especially those weird noises they make. But yeah, the levels in Silent Hill are your typical survival horror fare. You explore the area and progress using key items and puzzles, and let me tell you, the puzzles in this game are really good. Whether it's simply in combining a couple items together or an actual brain teaser, they seldom fail to make you feel smart for solving them. One thing that always confused me though was this bag of jelly beans. You open it and there's a key inside. Okay, well, couldn't they have just put a key there instead? I just think it's funny because if you put yourself in Harry's shoes, he clearly opened it because he wanted those jelly beans. He kind of fucked up though, because the jelly beans go everywhere and that floor is filthy. Anyway, the school also properly introduces us to the Otherworld. This is a hellish version of the level that you usually have to navigate a different way than before to reach your goal. Let me just say, the design of the Otherworld is awesome. Everything is rusty and metallic, and there's bodies everywhere, and there's some weird unexplainable details that really add to the atmosphere. Like how next to his body it says, "Leonard Rhine, the monster lurks." It really makes you wonder, who is Leonard Rhine? What monster's lurking? I don't know, you know, and I doubt Harry even knows. By the way, I'm definitely of the belief that the PS1 graphics give the Otherworld, and the game in general, a raw feel that makes the atmosphere even more malevolent and creepy. These Otherworld transitions always make the level even scarier, and this is only enhanced with the music. Akira Yamaoka is the sound designer of the game, and his score fits really well. Many of the tracks are industrial in the truest sense. Metallic clanging and grinding reminds me of those weird pioneering industrial bands, and these sounds make your encounters even more tense. He even uses a dentist drill on one song, which would probably make a lot of industrial artists pitch a tent. Akira also employs electronic noise and even a detuned piano to scare the player. But there's also a few laid-back trip-hop songs and ambient soundscapes in the soundtrack. Yamaoka would expand on this style in future games, but they're pretty few and far in between here. I really like the chill songs in this game though, since they have a distinct lo-fi quality that's not quite as present in the sequels, possibly due to a lower budget if I had to guess, but I think it sounds great. It's clear he wore his influences on his sleeve too, considering there's Portishead flyers above where Harry wakes up in the diner. Yeah, the music titillates my tip for sure, but being the sound designer also means Yamaoka was in charge of the ambient sounds, which are also a home run. You'll often hear weird bumps, glass breaking, and crying in the levels. Sometimes these sounds feel almost like jump scares, but not quite as cheap. They kinda keep you on your toes and don't let you get too comfortable. The first boss is at the school too, and it's pretty cool. I know some Silent Hill fans don't really care for the bosses in this game since they don't really serve much of a purpose, but I think they're pretty fun, if a bit easy. This one in particular has a pretty cool design. In fact, enemy design here is a bit of a mixed bag. I already talked about the great children, but I think the puppet doctors and nurses are pretty cool too. The way these ones stand and how they have the parasites on their back, I always thought was pretty cool. Some definite Jacob's Ladder influence there, but I feel like some monsters were kinda underutilized. Like I saw these things I think only one time, and they're one of the cooler designs in my opinion. Yet you see these bug things like every level. I also find it rather hard to take these monkey things seriously, to be honest. Like, I just want to give it a banana, you know? And yeah, I think monster design was definitely improved upon in further installments. The monster designer, Masahiro Ito, is a legend though. I would definitely recommend following him on Twitter since he has some pretty cool insights on the series. Just be wary of his fetish artwork and obsession with honey toast. But yeah, from the school you'll be going from level to level and meeting some people on the way, some more trustworthy than others. Aside from Harry and Sybil, you got Michael Kaufman, a sharply dressed doctor who looks like a mix between Richard Nixon and the G-Man, Dahlia Gillespie, an old lady who talks very dramatically and always steers you in the right direction, and Lisa Garland, a nurse at the local hospital. As you might expect from a PS1 game, the voice acting is kinda ass. It's not Jill Sandwich level bad, but the interactions are just really stilted.
Hold it! Stop! Don't shoot!
I guess it just comes with the territory though. It's due to the same reason that Harry doesn't really feel like that much of a character, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, Harry's a boss, but aside from the fact that he wants to save his daughter, he doesn't have too many personality traits. Once again though, I guess you can't expect too much from a PS1 game. The controls in the game are honestly not as bad as I probably thought they were when I was 10. I mean, there's 10 controls, but the camera angles are usually not fixed, and you can reposition the camera behind Harry using L2. I didn't think combat was too bad either. I mean, you can't cheese enemies really, but you have a choice between fast attacks and slow, heavy attacks. It's probably better to just use a gun if there's multiple enemies though. Harry locks on enemies like a fucking laser beam, although he will occasionally miss shots. The manual justifies this with the fact that since Harry's just a normal guy, he's not very precise in his shooting, and fair enough. Missed shots will definitely put you in a momentary panic, so I can see why this is a thing. Ammo is quite easy to come by though, even on hard difficulty. Unless you exclusively use guns, you'll probably have more than enough ammo throughout the game. And speaking of items, this inventory is just sexy. You got each item rendered in 3D, spinning around and stuff. It's just really cool. That picture in the top left also acts as Harry's health. I would definitely keep an eye on it, because there won't be any other indication of his health dropping whatsoever, so it can be easy to forget where your health is and die in a dumb way. As for the story, well, without giving spoilers, I definitely think the story is good, but it's pretty damn hard to follow if I'm being honest. The game will give you bits and pieces, but if you want it to make complete sense, you should probably just look up a summary or something. I understand people don't like stories being spoon-fed to them, but this game can be so vague with it that by the end you might just be like, what the fuck even happened? Speaking of the end, probably my biggest gripe of the game is how you achieve the best ending. It all depends on whether you use this bottle, which is pretty easy to overlook, to collect some juice on the floor, as well as if you do what is essentially a side mission that is completely out of the way of your objective at that time. Depending on which combination of these you decide to do, you can get the good plus, good, bad plus, or bad ending. Luckily, the replay value of this game is pretty high in my opinion. It's only about 5 hours long, which can go by a lot faster if you know what you're doing. There's even a New Game Plus and a 5th Goofy ending. You also get a different credit song depending on which ending you get, which is pretty neat. What doesn't change though is this strangely lighthearted blooper reel type thing after the credits with all the characters' CGI renders. It kind of feels like a thanks for playing type send-off. The song that plays during this sequence also kind of smacks. But yeah, those are my 2 cents on Silent Hill. I guess everything I said doesn't quite explain why I like it so much. Perhaps it's the visceral nature of the game. I mean, this game is definitely before my time. I looked like this in 1999, so I can't imagine what it was like to see a game like this on the PS1. Games like Resident Evil are not without their fair share of blood and gore, but Silent Hill is so dark with its visuals and themes that I imagine it was pretty surprising for a lot of survival horror fans. In any case, the game definitely holds a special place in my heart. Original copies of the game are expensive as fuck, but luckily you can get it for cheap on the PS3 or Vita store. Alternatively, you could just emulate it. I mean, you can play PS1 games on smartphones these days, so even a shitty PC should do the trick. In case it wasn't obvious though, I would definitely recommend this game. If anyone wants to hear my take on Silent Hill 2 or anything, just let me know. I mean, I can't imagine I'll say anything original about it, but that game is right up there with Silent Hill 1 for me, so I can talk about it all day. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm kind of in the mood for some pasta market, so see you later.